안녕하세요. Name Nichi, not Chim. So it's great to be back to Seoul again, and today I'm going to speak to you about Google Android O, what's new in Android O, and some of the major announcements in Android in I/O. So again, my name is Tony Chen, and I'm a developer advocate for Android. So I want to go back to the timeline for Android O. We announced developer preview back in March this year, and now we are on developer preview 4, and which means we already finalized all the API, and the final release of Android O will be coming very soon to everyone. As a developer, we think you have there will be some priorities you have to pay attention. There are two things I want to remind everyone. For Android O, the first thing you need to do is to get your app test and make it compatible with Android O. So I encourage you to start doing testing, either using Nexus device or even the emulator. So we have a emulator with developer preview O, and you can test your app right there to get prepared for our latest release. After you test your app and make it compatible, the next things you would like to consider is to consider using some of the new features in O. Of course, it has to be something that is useful to your application. So those are the two things I would like you to remind you. And then today, I'm going to split the agenda into 3 parts. So the first part is I would like to bring to your attention some of the breaking changes in O that may actually have a significant impact to your application. The next part, I will cover some of the new features, and finally, some useful information for you to take away. So let's jump to the first part. In O, we make additional enhancement in notification. As you can tell, in the past couple releases of Android, we keep making improvements on notification. One thing about notification in O, we categorize the notification into 4 new categories based on our user studies on our user attention. So the first one is the ongoing notification, which is showing the user what is ongoing, for example, in navigation, or there's a background process warning, so we want you to pay attention to, because that may be something that may use up your battery most. The second category is we believe people-to-people messaging is the second most important thing, and we put that types of notification in the second category. The third category is the general notification you guys are all familiar with. And finally, at the very bottom, we have something called by the way notification, which actually not some more informative notification that user may be interested when, but not very high priority. So that's how we break down notification in O. And there are 2 things we introduce in O. One is notification channels. I would like to bring to your attention, starting in O, if you target your application to O, you have to have at least 1 notification channel. Otherwise, your notification will not get to your user. Another new feature we add in O is notification badges, or we also call it dots. So this is a way to notify your user there are unhandled notifications for your application. And that is also very useful, something we hear a lot from you to have this feature in Android. The next feature that may actually have an impact on your application is related to system alerts window. Starting in O, as a developer, you will no longer be able to use system alert window. We added a new type of window called type application overlay. This will allow you to create overlay on top of the home screen, but not on system windows. So we think this will bring a better user experience to our user, so they can have better handling. There could be some malicious apps actually abusing the system alert windows, and we want to solve this problem in O by introducing this new type of overlay. We also add some new background limits in O, and of course, you may think like, oh, so more limits to developer. But the idea is really we want to improve the user experience. We want to improve the memory and battery performance in all the new devices. And that's why we introduce these kind of limits. The first thing is for background process, if your apps is running, the service is running in the foreground, there will be no change. But but when the device is in idle and you run the background service, that's when the service will start to get stopped by the operating system. One thing to notice is for locations, we also add some limits now for background applications. Application in the background will receive fewer updates starting in old devices. So this is regardless whether you target your application in O or not. So you may have the questions like, how can I get accurate location updates from now on in O? So we offer some best practices. One thing is you can consider running a foreground service so that you can continue getting frequent location updates. Another thing is consider using geofencing. We make geofencing 10 times more power efficient in O. And finally, location batching can also allow you to get multiple location points in one single call. So this will also help you to get more location points under the new limits. We also have new updates on the sensors side of things. One thing, if you are building VR type of applications, we now add a direct sensors channel, which allows you to get low latency sensor information from Android. Just like magnetometer and gyroscope, we also now in O added a new uncalibrated accelerometer data. And we also open source our calibration algorithm in AOSP. So you can use those algorithms in your sensor applications. Finally, we add a new type of sensor in the platform called low latency off-body detector. This is mainly used on devices like Android Wear, so you can detect whether the user is currently wearing the device or not. In terms of support library, we updated our minimum SDK version support to now 14. The benefit of this is we reduced the number of methods by 1.4K. So if you are running almost close to the 65K DEX method limits, so this will help you to further reduce the stress of running over. We also have a new issue tracker so that you can better report bugs to us through issuetracker.google.com under the components developer tools support libraries. We also add a new Maven repository now called in maven.google.com. But if you are using the latest version of Android Studio 3.0, you can just use Google parentheses instead of calling the URL directly. For the support library, we added a lot of new features, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time in that because my colleague Yuichi will present a separate version of a session of support library at noon today. Okay, so let's jump to the new part of Android O. So what's new? In UI, we add a new feature called adaptive icons. We understand developers suffer a lot because they have to handle different sets of icons for different OEMs. Maybe one OEM wants a circle icon, and the other OEMs want a square icon, right? So that has been a really painful point for our developers, and that's why we introduced adaptive icons. So all you need to do now is to provide us a background image, a foreground image, and depending on whether the OEM providing a square or round mask, we will use that, combining those, and create the final icons. So this is really useful for developers who have to handle a lot of different OEM devices. And the icon size is now bigger, and you have to create a 72 dp kind of icon, and we also have a safe zone, 66 dp. And everything within that safe zone will not get affected by the animation you may see on the screen here. So this is the new standard. I will encourage you to check out our guidelines. Widgets and shortcuts were pretty painful to trigger to add on the screen in the past through the in-store shortcut broadcast. We improved that in O by introducing two new APIs called request pin shortcuts and another one called request pin app widget. So this allows you to trigger the shortcuts mechanism directly from your application. So, and also in the past, through the broadcast, it's impossible for you to find out whether the shortcut is successfully added to the home screen. Now with the new API, there is a callback you can get from the request, and you can do some additional processing. Also, picture-in-picture, we introduced that last year on Android TV, and now we make it as available for all form factors. So picture-in-picture is now available in phone and tablets and other form factors. For multi-display, we now also support secondary display, and that means like your application can now even show up on the computer screen. But that also means you have to take care of all the screen configuration change, plus if the screen doesn't have touch screen, you may need to make your application work with mouse and non-touch screen surface. For color management, we also add wide gamut support. So that just depends on hardware availability. So if your application, the image support wide gamut, and also the hardware support wide gamut, you can now offer much richer color space pictures to your user. Finally, for animation, we also improve our animation set. One thing is you can now set where exactly in the animation to play, directly at which frame. And we also hear from you, a lot of time you want to reverse the animation, and in the past you have to do coding to achieve that. Now we add a very simple API called reverse to allow you to make the animation run the animation reversely. On the web, autofill is already used a lot for every one of us, but this is something missing in the native platform. So in O, we introduce autofill framework so that you can now, using this framework to gather information from autofill surface to fill in forms in your application. And as a service provider, you can also offer your service as an autofill service to other applications. We also improve animation by adding physics-based animation to our framework. And this is also backported to our support library. So what's new in media? So media, we also add some improvements. For example, we hear from you, you need more data, you need more metrics in some of the main classes in the media classes, like media player, media recorder, media codec. We add a new get metrics method in each of these classes so that you can get the configurations as well as the runtime information from these classes. For playback, we add APIs so that you can build a much more robust buffer control. And also, we have APIs to help you to get to the right frames. We have improvements in API help you to seek to the right frame. For recording, we now support MPEG-2 TS. So it's a new streaming format we support now. And we also support arbitrary number of audio and video tracks. And on top of that, we also support a new metadata track. If your application is building low latency pro audio types of applications, we also add a C library called A-audio. This is a very easy to use API compared to OpenSLES. And it will provide you low latency audio support. We added some new enhancement in WebView this time also. From O and on, WebView is now running in a separate process. That means when the WebView crash, it will no longer actually crash your application. We also add new version API so that you can query which version of API WebView or which type of WebView user is using. And now the Chrome WebView now support Google Safe Browsing. Finally, we add some new additional APIs so that you can do some handling when the system actually reclaim the WebView before the crash. You can now have APIs to handle some post-processing. In Android O, we added some new features in terms of text. Now, fonts is first-class citizen on Android. That means you can define fonts in the XML layout. And also, we now support downloadable fonts. And the Google font library is one of the first font provider in this new framework. Last but not least, text view. We understand a lot of you had to write a lot of code to make text view auto-sizable. Now we make it native in the platform. And the good news is we also bring this back to, backport this to our support library for older version. Accessibility, we add a lot of new features there too. And one thing is, in the past, the accessibility volume and the media volume are on the same channel. So that means if someone is running accessibility while playing YouTube, if I want to hear the accessibility voice louder, the YouTube stream volume also get louder, which is not a good experience. Now we separate the two things into the accessibility volume in a separate channel so that you can turn on the accessibility volume higher, but not like the other channel. A lot of devices now support fingerprint hardware, and we now add this to our accessibility API so that you can use the fingerprint sensor to add like fingerprint gesture for accessibility. For multilingual support, we use machine learning in our text-to-speech recognition so that we can detect which language and play the speech in the right language. For people with reading challenge, we also add something new called select to speak, so they can select an area on the screen, and we will read back to the user the selection area. So there are a lot of new stuff in accessibility, and I encourage you to look at our detailed documentation. In terms of system improvements, for debugging, we added 3 new policies in strict mode to help you debug your application. For file access, especially for remote large file access, now we support a new thing called remote seekable file descriptor, so that you don't need to download the entire file before you access the file. For cache data, in the storage manager, we now add 2 new methods to allow you to query the quota the system would like you to have before aggressively actually claim back your cache data. So try to use the get cache quota bytes to get the optimal size for your cache. For some large file, temporary files, you need some temporary large space, you should use the get allocatable bytes, but this is only for temporary size large files cache size. If you want to offer some contextual experience to your user, in O, we added a new feature called Wi-Fi Aware. It's based on the Neighbor Awareness networking standard. But if you want something that is more backward compatible, we also have something called Nearby Connection offered in the Play services that allows you to discover device offline, doesn't require the cloud. And also the Awareness API will also give you different contexts. Those are the 7 contexts available through the Awareness API. So if you need to build some intelligent apps, these will be the APIs you would like to check out later. In terms of security, in Google Play, we offer something called Google Play Protect. And there are a few APIs actually allow you to check whether the current device your application is running on, whether it is in a safe environment. So there should be another talk later covering security. And so I will leave it to young Felix to cover that in detail with you guys later. Again, for Instant App, the key message is now we open this up to all developers. And in Android Studio 3.0, we now have official Android Instant App development support. There is a separate talk about Android Instant App by Jonathan at 2:30 today. So I will encourage you to take a look. For addressing the emerging market, we announced Android Go at I/O. And for these new types of devices, we offer data management and savings for all the first-party apps, Google apps, we also make a new experience for our users in emerging markets. If your application also targets emerging markets, I highly encourage you to look at our Build for Billions documentation. Some key takeaways is you should make your apps useful offline, and also try to keep the APK size to 10 megabytes or smaller. Lifecycle awareness component, this will be covered in great detail by Sun-Min Lee from the Drama and Company later in the afternoon. So I have a few more slides. One thing for information, So we spend a lot of time to improve system health on Android. And the goal here is really to make the better health measurements like more accurate, and also provide you more data to make it actionable. So this is something we introduced in Play Console called Android Vitals, and it gives you a lot of like ANR data, crash data, frozen frame, etc. All these informations. Please take advantage of these data and try to improve your applications. For Android development tools, my colleagues Chen Sok will cover this in detail right after this talk. So I'll leave it for him to do that. Last but not least, for Gradle, a lot of you cares about Gradle build speed. And there are 10 tips actually covered in this I/O talk. This is a, sorry. This is a great talk covering all the 10 tips. Some of them are very simple things to change in the Gradle files. Highly encourage you to take a look at this talk. Finally, this is something free for everyone, for every Android developers. We keep improving our art runtime performance and also memory. For DAX files like optimizations, we use the JIT profiles to move all the important files together into like similar memory pages. And by doing that, we improve memory usage by 1/3. And in terms of garbage collector, we also have a new garbage collector in O. And these new garbage collectors have average pause time input. Now is actually 0.4 milliseconds compared to 2.5 milliseconds back in Android N. So our framework team works very hard to keep improving our runtime, and we hope actually you guys can also improve your application together with us. This is pretty much all I have for today, and I will be available in the Ask the Speaker zone. And thank you for your time. 감사합니다.